USA. All right. So after a trip to Puerto Rico, that was really just a few weeks for Anthony to choose if he was Team Barbie or Team Oppenheimer.
Wow.
Spoiler alert, he's not. He's just Team Barbenheimer. We're back. The NFL Training Camp Edition is on. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait, the person who loves Barbenheimer, by the way.
And that's Joe Tufaro, by the way, who is just not going to even get himself into this mess. We'll talk with him in just a second. This, again, is our NFL Training Camp edition of On the Sports Line. So we'll get to our compadre, Mr. Joe Tufaro, in just a little bit. But first, we start with FUTBOL. That's
Well done,
right.
Rabbi.
From football to football. Let's go. All right. So after the Men's World Cup, just wanted to do something over here, so just give me a second while I stall. After the Men's World Cup just 7 months ago, where Lionel Messi officially took care of the last great thing he's ever going to do in his career now that he's with the MLS, it's the women's turn with 32 teams just like the men, but unlike pay, that's not equal. Unlike the men, the U.S. women will look to be the first national soccer team ever. That would be men's or women's if you are trying to listen out there. They're going to be the first ever team to try to win 3 of these things in a row. It's not easy to do. So they won game 1 versus Vietnam 3-0, and they're actually playing right now down 1-0 in the 2019 Cup final rematch right now versus the Netherlands. So Jay,
yeah,
you're going to be looking at this being the last World Cup potentially.
Possibly.
Alex Morgan and Julie Ertz, and definitely the last 4.
Megan Rapinoe.
Bloody Rapinoe.
Yep. Love that.
I'm
I'm going to tell you, Rabbi, based on the way she's kind of recovered from injury and childbirth over the last couple of years, I kind of left Julie off my my angle because something tells me she's going to be back in 2023. But I am limiting 2027. Sorry, but I will talk a little.
Throw a little bit about the older players on the
and I'll
team.
throw in
older guard
there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's rare to see such a championship level team have as much of an outgoing generation as this edition of the U.S. women's national team does, while at the same time having a similarly sized incoming generation. Megan Rapinoe, who hit her 200th cap against Vietnam, has already said this is her last World Cup. She's retiring at the conclusion of the NWSL season. And it could very well be the last one for 34-year-old striker and co-captain Alex Morgan, 207 caps. 35-year-old goaltender Alyssa Nair, who has 91, as both will be approaching 40 when the 2027 World Cup comes around. So I figured it was worth looking at what these 3 have done and what they'll be asked to do for this team. We'll start with Rapinoe, who's going to be more of a sub. Is the wild card for this team, but that's what Rapinoe will be. And it's because while she can't play the full 90 anymore, she does know how to close out games. The plan was for, her not to just be a super sub to help close up games. She was supposedly going to take this opportunity to be a real mentor to Mallory Swanson, who has long been tabbed as her replacement on left wing. Swanson's out with an injury after telling her patella tendon in April. So Rapinoe's role has changed. It might not result in substantially more minutes, but between her ability to create chances, her expertise in dead balls, and her know-how and bag of tricks, team manager Vlatko Andonovski and the team can look to her in big moments and have faith that she'll come through. 200th appearance for her came 16 years and 364 days after her first. It's the longest gap between 1 and 200 in team's history. 13th player to reach that level. One of 3 still active player to hit that milestone alongside Morgan and Becky Sauerbrunn. Heading into her 4th World Cup, top 10 in U.S. women's national team history in both goals and assists. One of the most impactful players both on and off the field in team history. Epic 2019 World Cup, collecting numerous prestigious awards, the Golden Ball, Golden Boot at the World Cup, Best FIFA Player of the Year, France football Ballon d'Or, 6 goals, 3 assists in the 2019 Cup, and her game-winning penalty kick in the World Cup final was her 50th career goal. Hopefully she gets to have a nice swan song. Alyssa Nair has been the team's #1 goalie since the end of the 2016 Olympics, has often been tested in net during this NWSL season with a pretty bad Chicago Red Stars team. However, in international play, she has kept a clean sheet in 8. She was viewed as a weak link by opponents in the previous World Cup in France 4 years ago, but came up with crucial saves in crucial moments. Team's going to need a repeat of that performance down under. Only once has she allowed more than 1 goal among those dozen matches. The 2-1 defeat at Wembley Stadium against England. She was also in goal in 2 other big games for the team in 2022. Title game of the CONCACAF Women's Championship, where she pitched a shutout to qualify the U.S. for 2023 World Cup and the 24 Summer Olympics, and the final game of the season in 2022, 2-1 win over Germany in New Jersey. In the 19 World Cup, played every minute of all 7 matches in France, allowed only 3 goals, put up 4 shutouts, 5th goalkeeper in U.S. history to earn a shutout in Women's World Cup final, 3rd all-time in caps, wins, and shutouts. And finally, there's Alex Morgan. 2-time Women's World Cup champ, silver boot at the 19 FIFA Women's World Cup, 6 goals, 3 assists, made her the joint top scorer of the tournament. Tied the USA single game scoring record, 5 goals in the opening match against Thailand. Appeared in all 7 games at the 15 World Cup, making 5 starts, scoring against Colombia while helping USA to its first World Cup title since '99. 4-time CONCACAF Player of the Year, 5-time FIFA Pro Women's World 11 honoree, heading into her 4th World Cup, top 10 in U.S. women's national team history in goals, assists, and multi-goal games. Now, her international scoring rate has slowed since 2020, down to 0.4 goals per cap. Previously, through 19, it was 0.63. Her Golden Boot winning display in the 2022 NWSL season reminded everybody she still got it. League's top scorer, 15 goals in just 17 regular season games for the expansion San Diego Wave FC. She's playing more selflessly, often collecting the ball in the wide left channel, leading to 2.48 non-penalty, PK shots per 90 clip. That's 3rd on her own team. However, she's atop the Wave's assist charts, despite missing 2 games, suggesting she might be ready to share the burden of goal scoring with Sophia Smith. Anthony, I'm sure we'll have more on her in a minute. More than any other player on this roster, Morgan's locked in as a starter at a very specific spot. The lineup graphics may show you a 4-3-3, but on the field, it's probably going to look a little bit more like a 4-4-1-1 or a 4-2-3-1 with Morgan up top. After playing all but 6 minutes in the U.S.'s 4 knockout matches in 19, she may be asked to carry a similar load this summer. However, if she needs to miss a group stage game for load management, it could give Smith a chance to begin her claim as the next great American striker a bit sooner than anticipated. And before I cede my time, gents, I want to give a special shout out to 38-year-old captain and center back Becky Sauerbrunn, who after 216 caps with the national team will unfortunately miss what in all likelihood would have been her final World Cup after injuring her foot while playing for the Portland Thorns in April. Her absence created a hole in the USA's defense that will require others to step up. Thankfully, this team has Julie Ertz, who has the ability to play multiple positions. She stepped in a Sauerbrunn's spot and handled it seamlessly in the 3-0 win over Vietnam, but Sauerbrunn is demonstrably missed by this team. It sucks that her career is likely to end due to an injury.
I can't believe you just said the words load management in a World Cup, considering the fact that they're probably going to need all of the goals they can if they end up not getting an equalizer against the Netherlands in this game. Currently,
Hey,
load management is not something that is going to be a case in this year's Women's World Cup, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Anthony, if you want to repeat and continue your streak, you have to have some new blood. If anybody can hear me with my terrible connection, Anthony, let me know. Now, can you hear me? Good. Anthony, let us know about the new blood on this Women's World Cup team and how they could affect this 2023 run.
Well, Jay mentioned Alice Morgan. Everybody have a possible future face. He's also mentioned Sophia Smith.
Keep it up for you, buddy.
The young 22-year-old from Windsor, Colorado. She is the 2022 NWSL MVP and championship game MVP, and obviously one of the front forwards in that 4-3-3 setup that the United States implement. As a center forward, she's even better when she plays for the Portland Thorns FC. The way the United States construct their lineup, She can rotate her way from the front and to the back nine rotation. She's a national champion with Stanford, won the NCAA championship in 2019. And obviously, before the World Cup, she basically has scored in, let's see here, she's got a second hat trick in the game prior to the going to the World Cup. This is her stats from that game against Washington. Second hat trick, the youngest player in NWSL history to 30 goals, and basically left her team at the top of the table as she head off to the World Cup. Now, in that World Cup opener, her debut, 2 goals and assisted on a third one. The youngest player to score multiple goals in a FIBA World Cup debut, and also to contribute to three goals in a World Cup debut. You see the commercials, you've seen the interviews. She's very confident in her ability. She's had a couple of chances in this particular match against the Netherlands early on, but in the first 15. The United States are going to need her scoring. Obviously, one of the major injuries it suffered was the Mallory Swanson, another attacker that the United States could have desperately used in a World Cup, particularly knowing that they drew a tough, disciplined defensive team like the Netherlands in the group. So they're going to need Smith's ability to be creative, to be able to finish with both feet, and to be able to set up others, as she did on that third goal in the World Cup opener against Vietnam. They're going to need that in this match, though. They're definitely going to need it moving forward if they want to at least get to the round of 16 and give themselves an opportunity to defend their World Cup.
Yep.
Well, they're going to get to the round of 16 most likely. I mean, Portugal is a little bit of a challenge, but you remember, you can still get a top two. You can still get a top two group win. So that's something. So
winning a group and coming in second. It's
not as much of a bigger difference, because that difference could be the fact of playing the Italy in the round of 16, or Sweden, who is currently ranked 3rd in the FIFA Women's World Cup rankings. Some teams to look out for really quickly. Germany dominated in their first game. They are usually a force, and probably one of the best forces out there to begin with. It's Marta's last World Cup, probably the most recognizable, honestly, probably the most recognizable name in all of women's soccer worldwide, but definitely for Brazil. So that's going to be a good story to see. Sweden looked really good in their first game as well. They're going to be a tough out again. That's not a team you want to face in a round of 16. Netherlands, who was the team that the U.S. beat in the World Cup final, currently winning right now. Ranked number 9 in the world. Definitely a team to watch out for. There's a lot of competition here in this Women's World Cup, and don't forget about the host Australia too. They're ranked 10th in the world as well. But so there's a lot of competition in this Women's World Cup. So it's not just if the U.S. doesn't repeat, not just the fact that they might not win. It's not because they weren't good enough. It's because everybody is kind of caught up to the United States when it comes to women's soccer. Usually when there's a tournament like this, it's usually who are the 4 teams that can win, and then where's everybody else. Here, it's a little more wide open. Even look for England. They are the reigning Euro champs from last year. So a lot of different ways this Women's World Cup can go, and this is going to be very, very interesting to the end. Again, you could also look at Canada. One fun fact that I really love, there is one coach in this World Cup that's actually coaching France, who they just fired their head coach about a few months ago due to player mutiny, rightfully so. And they got the men's coach of Saudi Arabia, the men's national team head coach of Saudi Arabia. And if you remember, Saudi Arabia is the only team that beat Argentina in the 2021/22 in the 2022 World Cup. So he's coaching a second team for a second straight World Cup, men's and women's. So France is also in the same group as Brazil is, though. So good luck on that one, guys.
Our first time in history that the Women's World Cup is 32 teams. So expanded field, more chances for things to happen.
Yeah. wait until that becomes like 96 teams, like the men's is
No,
about to do,
stop.
since
Come
it's already at
on.
48. All right, let's move on because Joe can't sit here forever. Home field advantage is on this show. By the way, welcome back, Joe Tufaro. It's nice to see you as we head into the long and winding
Welcome
road
back,
of
my
NFL
friend.
training camp.
got my,
We have a lot.
I was looking at my first 2 weeks schedule for officiating high school football. So
Not as many new rules this year, I would think, considering every year it seems like there's a lot of adjustments that I've seen for NFL officials. So luckily, this year we won't have to talk as much about that at all sports. All right. So we are going to play home field advantage here. So we'll start with the Giants as we start to look at burning questions for each training camp. So the Giants got back into this thing that is called the playoffs. Yes, playoffs. The 9-7-1 record in 22-23. That got first-year coach Brian Daboll the NFL Coach of the Year. Now, with Daniel Jones coming off his best year, and person that's going to be in MetLife for a little while longer, and a star running back in Saquon Barkley that got franchised and eventually is coming to camp. We'll get more on him a little bit later on. The Giants started training camp yesterday and will begin their campaign on September 10th at home versus the Cowboys, because in tradition, if the Giants and Cowboys are good at the same time, they have to start opening weekend and they have to start on a Sunday night. It's the law.
Of course they do.
Joe, we've got some questions about the Giants 2023 budget training camp battles. Jay, you want to start us off? Or is it Anthony that starts us off?
No, I'm starting us off. So, plenty of new faces in camp, Joe, draft picks, free agent acquisitions, etc. I know who my face, my new face here to watch is, and I think he's going to be a very impactful player. Let's see if you concur with me. Who's the new face in Giants camp that you're going to be watching as things unfold in the preseason and training camp?
Yeah, I think the much ballyhooed person that they added was Darren Waller, and so we have to kind of go in that direction.
Agreed.
Just to see what he can bring to this. Now, again, he's coming off some injuries, and so that was one of the ways that they were able to get him. But the way that they got him for trading Kadarius Toney for 2 draft picks and being able to switch one of those picks over for Darren Waller was a home run as far as everybody on the team was concerned.
Yeah.
And everybody in the home office was concerned. And he's been here the longest as a free agent. He was one of the first guys they went after. So I think everybody's looking to see what he can add to this offense. A veteran guy. He's been around for 6 years. He's played very well. He's had over 100 catches a couple of years in the middle of his thing before he got hurt. So hopefully you can keep a guy like this healthy. And, as well as Daniel Jones did with Daniel Bellinger and a couple of other guys, whose names escape most people last year, the way he was able to be successful. And again, as you guys know, as I always say, it's an ultimate team game. It's not one guy that's going to make a difference. It's the fact that you now have him added into this group of wide receivers, which we'll get to in a little bit while when we talk about it more, but having Saquon back, which again, we'll talk about a little bit later. But, the fact that Daniel Jones was able to go through the season with 5 interceptions and not turn the ball over, not fumble the ball, and just be successful that way. And I don't even consider the season to be the successful part. I consider winning that game in Minnesota to be the successful part because, again, the playoffs have gotten to the point where it's, 9 games is going to get you in now. So, no, and until they go to 20 games, 9 is still always going to get you in. It's like they can go to 18, they can go to 19.
They're going to go to 20 games eventually, so might as well try it now.
It's like 9 or 10 wins is still the key. No matter how good anybody is, unless you are one of these teams that's just that's their year and they're going to go out and win a bunch of games. That's it. That's what you're looking for these days, is to get to whatever it is, 9 and 9 and 10, 9 and 9 and 9.
9 and 8. 9 and 8, 9 and 8, and the 9-7-1 really screwed it up last year. That stupid tie.
That's like the minimum,
the funny thing is, Joe, is like, I completely agree with you. Waller's the guy. And when I was doing a little research to kind of, get myself, up to speed on this guy, there's some things that jumped out at me that surprised me. you talk about the health, and that's a big thing. I mean, he was only available for 9 of 17 games. He's only played 20 of the last 34. But between 19 and 20, when he was healthy, 197 catches, 2,341 yards, 12 touchdowns, didn't miss a game those 2 seasons, trailed only Travis Kelce in terms of touchdown, in terms of catches and yards during that stretch. 4th in the position at TDs. And one of the things I like about him, Joe, is schematically the options that he gives Dable and Kafka. I mean, over the last 4 years, lined up in line 57% of the time, in the slot 23% of the time, split wide on 19% of the snaps. I mean, Dable, with his experience, you know, in New England as tight ends coach when Gronk was there, and Kafka with all that time spent with Kelce. I mean, you got to believe that they are, you know, drooling at the options that he gives them in terms of being able to, you know, not have to completely sub out of, let's say, your base, you know, 13 personnel.
Right.
You know, because you can put him in any number of places. He's healthy. He's a freaking nightmare mismatch for
and he's one of those guys that, you know, it's there's one of those guys. There's a couple of those guys that have come along that always say the words, you know, I'm open on every play.
the time. Yeah.
And they said he's a tough guy to cover because of his size, because of his speed. So, you know, you kind of picture him with that Mark Bavaro, you know, to go far enough back so nobody who's listening to this knows who I'm talking about. You know, but that kind of a presence.
Whoa, oh, come on. I know who you're talking
You're
about.
not young, Anthony, so it doesn't count.
Exactly. But that kind of a presence where he could go down the middle of the field and you just have to throw it up high to him. He can get it in the end zone, but he can also run. And they said, you know, there's a bunch of Ferraris on this team. They have a bunch of speed now on this team, which just makes everything underneath work better. You know, if everybody does go deep and you're saying, okay, they don't have the time to get the ball down there. Well, you still got Saquon underneath. You still got the slot guys. You still got Wan'Dale Robinson. You still got Sterling Shepard when he comes back. So, you know, you still have a lot of openings here and a lot of things to do. And I just think it just makes the offense that much more versatile,
dynamic.
I guess is the word. Yeah.
It's a dynamic, that they did not have. I mean, you think about it, even with all the time he's missed over the last 2 years, he's still ranked 5th among NFL tight ends in 20+ yard catches. So, I mean,
and being able to be there with Bellinger and to teach him to bring him along and all that stuff.
I was going to ask, what do you see as the plan for Daniel Bellinger this season, considering how good of a
tight end personnel setup
he had?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you know, now when you need to run the ball at the end of the game, you're going to put those 2 guys in there with Saquon, and the game's going to be over with that 4 minutes to go. If you have a lead, you're going to be able to do all that short yardage stuff. You're going to be able to do all that without having to have Daniel Jones put it in his hands all the time. But I think Bellinger, until he got hurt last year, you know, really played very well, was coming along good for a rookie until he got his eyes poked out in Seattle. I think that he's only going to get better as it goes along. And again, to be able to learn from somebody like
and insurance,
and again, insurance that we all know that depth on these teams is key. And we talk about it all the time is some, you know, guys are going to get hurt. And even if he's only out for a 2-week period or something, and you consider a guy pretty healthy now if he only misses a couple of games during the year, because everybody does get hurt. So it'll be nice to have a little bit of depth, a little bit of play. If the guy, even if he has to go out in the middle of the game for a couple of plays, you don't lose everything. You have a guy who can take his spot.
Sorry, quick soccer interruption. Alex Morgan just hit the back of the net to put the U.S. up 2-1.
Thank you for ruining that to me. That actually, I think, got overturned as an offsides, by the way. So, that's
Dang it.
Let's get back to the topic at hand, Anthony.
Okay. Well, speaking of depth, the Giants have 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, let's just say they have a lot of wide receivers. Okay. Daniel, the receivers that started last season for the Giants, Kenny Galladay and Sterling Shepard. That wasn't the receivers that ended the season in Philadelphia in that divisional round. There was Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, and Richie James, who was no longer with the team. There was pretty much boatload of wide receivers at this point. And I'd like to get your opinion on the wide receiver situation and the fact that not only is it so wide open, but the Giants going to training camp without a true number one wide receiver on this roster. I mean, what do you think the Giants are looking at as far as the receivers and even any chemistry with Daniel Jones between camp and the preseason?
Yeah, well, I think, again, they have like 15 guys in camp or whatever on the wide receiver spot. That wasn't my line, by the way, of having to have chairs out in the hallway for the meeting room because they can't fit them all in there. But and they're still bringing guys in that have different skill sets and can help the younger guys along. And Sterling Shepard and Wan'Dale Robinson are still on PUP, so they're not practicing yet. And they'll come back somewhere during training camp. But I think they proved last year, that and Joe Shane said it at the end of the year. We're not necessarily going after a number one guy. We don't have that kind of luxury yet where they could go out, try to sign somebody, some free agent or whatever at that point. So, but I think they like this group of hardworking guys. You don't need a big name. You don't have to be the guy. Darius Slayton, I think after that drop in the Minnesota game, may be the best guy on the field this year because they're all like that. They all want to take responsibility. They want to play what they do. Even the way they got to get Galladay to block in the run game last year at the end of the year when he knew he was getting cut, he knew all the fans didn't like him. That coaching staff has a way of making these guys work and making these guys be part of the team. And so, you have Isaiah Hodgins, you have Slayton, you have the new guy Hyatt, you got Paris Campbell, you got Colin Johnson, you have Jamison Crowder, you have all these guys that are going to be out there. But again, you keep 6 or 7 of them, you put 3 of them on the practice squad, you're going to have a bunch of guys coming in and out. And the Giants, it sounded like it was just coach speak last year, but they were honest about they're going to start each game with a fresh game plan to go up against the team they're playing, and they're going to play the guys they think fit into that. So if they need more speed one day because they think they can beat the safeties on the other team or whatever it is, they'll play a different combination of wide receivers. So I don't mind not having the top guy. I mean, Hyatt may wind up being that guy. Slayton may wind up being that guy at some point, but I don't think it matters. I think the way that they're gonna move the ball around, and again, Kafka's used to this in Kansas City, right? To have to get it to everybody, not just to go to one guy all the time. I think that just makes them stronger. All these guys, right? You never thought Isaiah Hodgins was going to be making big catches.
No.
And just because the guy doesn't have a household name doesn't mean he's not any good. But they added a lot of speed, like you said, in Paris Campbell and Hyatt.
I like that pickup, Joe. I like the pickup of Campbell.
I think a lot of these guys are looking for their second chance. I think a lot of these guys who are high draft picks, by the way, who didn't make it in other teams or had gotten hurt and now they're coming back, you give them a chance to prove they want to be in the league and you give them a spot to land and it could be really good. So I don't think you're going to know, Anthony, until the last day who's actually going to be on this team and whether or not they keep 7 or 8 or whatever, make one guy a punt returner and kind of hold on to that. Obviously, special teams plays big into those positions.
Yep.
But I think that's what they'll do. They'll keep 7 and then they'll put 3 of them on the junior squad and see who's active every week.
If I gave you,
well, I'm sorry, I didn't cut you off, but there are 2 guys I am keeping my eye on in training camp. Slayton is one because obviously you think about the rapport he had with Daniel Jones that rookie season in 2019 and how they had that great connection. And you saw it last year if Slayton could get a hold on the case of the drops. You talk about that drop in the playoff game against Minnesota and how big that would have been had the Giants defense not make that last stand on Kirk Cousins on that 4th and long. But also Wan'Dale Robinson. You saw some flashes in that Detroit Lions game. That was a loss. He had 13 catches, 13 targets, 100 yards before he went down with the injury. And I think when you look at that slot receiver position, I think it's going to be very key for the Giants because I think with the guys they have speedsters that can kind of exploit that slot receiver mismatch. It's just going to be a wonder of who's going to get that. Is it going to be Robinson? Is it going to be Hyatt? Is it going to be Campbell? It's going to be Cole Beasley, who they just invited to training camp. So they have a lot of different directions to go with that slot and that fourth wideout when they decide to go for deep. They can line Waller up too, because he's a guy who goes vertical, and his best season with the Raiders, he was a vertical threat down the field and over the middle, which is something the Giants have really not had since Jeremy Shockey, that really put a deep postal threat. I mean, you could throw in Jake Ballard as well, but I mean, a guy that someone has to go in a game plan against the tight end position. Giants haven't had that for quite a while.
Yep. Well, it's nice that, and just to get back to Waller for a minute, it's nice to have somebody who has a reputation that guys are going to look at, right? When you have Bellinger, even if Bellinger could do all the same things, he was a rookie last year. Nobody knows what he's going to be. So teams aren't necessarily going to game plan against him unless he breaks out and becomes something. Now you got guys going, we have to put our best safety, or we got to put a slot guy on that tight end, or we have to double this guy in certain situations, which just because he has a last name and just because he's done it before, that makes you do it. And that's going to open it up for other guys. So.
Yep.
So I just want to throw one curveball in there. Who do you think will end up getting more touches as the season goes on at the backup running back position? Because I'm really interested to see if Eric Gray can actually become a number 2 guy, or eventually possibly a star, because we know how that running back position is very replaceable, as we'll talk about later on.
Yeah, I think, again, with rookies, as we all, like I always say, someone's going to get hurt, number one. But if he can play special teams, which I think he can, and he can make a name for himself in coverage units or somewhere on there, which a lot of these guys have done, maybe even running back kickoffs, I think he'll stick, and I think he'll be good because, like you said, you always have to be careful because Breida's a little bit older. Obviously, he's a year older, but
he knows the system, though, which is, I think, the bigger reason why he's here.
So he's going to be there, and now that Saquon's going to be in total camp, I think it'll make it a little bit tougher on him to stick around because how many touches does he get? But he's going to play in every preseason game. He's going to play in all 3 preseason games. So because the cut doesn't come down until after the last game anymore, anyway. So you're going to see a lot of them. They'll be able to see a lot of them. Hopefully, he can show himself that he can do a lot more than just be, the occasional guy who's going to get a few touches if the game's out of hand or whatever, or if someone goes down. I think the preseason will be big for him, and hopefully he sticks. And like you said, that's just more depth at that point, and that's what you're going to need. So,
and I think that's where you want it too. Okay, Joe, let's move over to the defense. A lot of guys in camp for another year. I'm sure there are some places that you're going to be looking at in terms of big battles. Which one are you looking at on the defensive side?
Well, I think, the defensive backs, specifically safety, because they let Julian Love walk. Julian Love, who went to the school of Joe Shane very early. He decided he wanted I wanted this amount of money, and they said, we're not giving it to you. And he goes, fine, I'm going to free agency. And when he came crawling back 3 days later, they said, no, thanks. And he wound up going to Seattle for less money than he was offered by the Giants. But that was the start of the new, as much as the Daboll era started last year with the win in Tennessee and going for 2 points and all that stuff, and all the big wins on the road and stuff. I think the Joe Shane era started this year because he needed to figure out the cap space and he needed to figure out who he could start. And that's how he's going to be from now on is we offered you a fair amount of money. You decide to go to free agency. Don't think the door's always open when you come back. And so he let him leave. But I think they saw enough out of Dane Belton last year as a rookie, even though he was, again, missed a few games, but everybody does. He played very well when he was in there. And I think that, you have a lot of guys. This is another room that's pretty crowded. There's probably 12 defensive backs in total on the roster right now. But again, you need 90 to practice. So there's always going to be a bunch of guys. But you hope that Deonte Banks and the guy on the other side, besides, and Adoree Jackson. are the
Adoree
two
Jackson,
starters.
yeah.
Yeah, and then then it'll be between Flott and Darnay Holmes to see who's going to be in the slot. Holmes got better last year. Flott played great in the Minnesota game. And again, I think there's a little bit of a misconception about, and we saw it a lot in the Minnesota game. A little bit of a misconception about passing defenses and ranks and giving up yardage and stuff, because when Wink Martindale plays defense, he does it for a reason. He does it because he's going to go back to something later on that you haven't seen for a while. And in that last Minnesota series, he went back to man, and guys like Flott stepped up, Darnay Holmes stepped up. Guys made plays on those. And when they're playing zone, they're not supposed to be blanketing guys. You're going to give up some yardage. You're going to give up some reception. So I don't think that guys are as bad as sometimes they look on film when you just see one play here and there, because they're supposed to be playing an area, and that's what they're doing. They're not supposed to be blanketing somebody. But I think it'll be interesting between Pinnock and Belton to see who plays next to McKinney. So that'll be a good battle. And then you have Flott and Holmes going for the slot. You got Nick McLeod, you got Bobby McCain, you got, the new guy, Deontay Banks, who I think is going to make up for Julian Love, because Julian Love led the team in tackles last year out of the secondary. So I think Banks is that kind of guy, and that's what they wanted in that pick, was somebody who was physical, somebody who would come up and hit, somebody who's not going to run the other way when he sees the running back coming. And so those will be interesting to see. Again, how many of those guys are you going to be able to keep? I named 10 of them, plus you got 2 more rookies. So can you keep 11 guys? What is your structure going to be, and what's your roster development going to be, and how many guys you're going to be able to sign on to a practice squad, and and have a rotation basically as you go through, like they did last year. They had for the last 2 years, they've had a rotation at defensive back. It's just a matter of, again,
and a good rotation too. Just a rotation that just needs to get reps.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see who they can keep, but there's plenty of guys in camp, and I think that they can do a pretty good job, because there's that veteran is there. You talk about who's going to play next to McKinney, but you got McKinney, who's a superstar. You've got Adoree Jackson on one side, so now you just got to find the other. You got, even at linebackers, you got Areki and a couple of, you're looking for the other guy, which is good. So there's a veteran presence there to bring them along to teach, to go through the whole camp. I think it's really positive. And then up front, re-signing Dexter Lawrence, that was
huge,
unbelievable last year, and to sign the other guy from Tampa Bay, Roche, and stuff. So I think they have a nice again, a nice flow up front, and a nice be able to keep guys fresh, and you'll be able to play them on different downs and stuff. So I think they're in good shape. I think for what they wanted to do, they had a very good draft.
Yeah,
I know we talked about it that night, but the first 3 guys they picked were all mocked to them at number 25 at one point. So the first round pick, the second round pick, and the third round pick were all mocked to them at number 25, which maybe doesn't mean anything, but to them it was a home run that they got 3 guys that they could have picked in the first 3 rounds.
To be fair, I think that just shows how shitty mock drafts is, but that's just me. All right. What's that noise you hear? Oh my God, it's the 3-ring circus. Let's go to the New York Jets. 7-10 a year ago.
I have no notes for the Jets. Just so you know.
I have notes for the Jets. All right, 7-10 a year ago, but then they went and got the ultimate upgrade. I don't care what you think about Aaron Rodgers, but 4-time MVP, when you had a guy who I don't think people thought could throw the ball correctly more than 10 yards, that's the ultimate upgrade. Yeah. Super Bowl winning quarterback Aaron Rodgers, albeit in a different decade. The expectations are sky high for the Jets in 2023, but this is the AFC, where the Chiefs and Bengals have represented in the AFC Championship game the last 2 years. And that division has 3 teams that have done a lot more work than the Jets have had in their entire franchise history, and they're not going to go anywhere near the side. FYI, only 8 days until their first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game against the Browns. Yes, 2 Jets are going into the Hall of Fame this year. The apocalypse is officially upon September 11th will be the Jets' first actual game. They will be hosting, just Josh Allen and the Bills. Simple, right?
Yeah.
Jay, although Joe has no notes, let's ask Joe some questions about MetLife's other tenant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to spoil it because, I mean, it's the captain obvious answer. Of all the new faces that have been brought in the offseason between, draft picks and free agents and et cetera, we all know that the only new face that's going to be worth watching, that everybody's going to be paying attention to, is the aforementioned Aaron Rodgers. Joe, I made the case, last year the case could be made, and I made it more than once on this show, that even with tier 3 level quarterback play, the Jets would have made the playoffs with that defense. And having Rodgers, who so far has fully embraced his role as a leader, I mean, guy's practically a player coach at this point, with the amount of knowledge and say-so of the offense that's being installed. He's created such a buzz around Florham Park, the likes of which nothing the organization hasn't seen in decades, to the point where you got head coach Robert Saleh publicly stating the Jets are one of the teams capable of winning a Super Bowl this year because of the player they just added at QB1. Now, I'm not ready to go that far like the rabbi. I think, the AFC East is a big enough challenge to begin with. And if you manage to get out of it, you still got to deal with the likes of, Cincinnati and Kansas City. Obviously, we're all eyes are going to be on Rodgers. What are you going to be looking for in camp? Obviously, he probably won't play much in the preseason, but what are you going to be looking for from him in camp and during, joint practices, and all the 11-on-11s? What are you looking for from him that's going to have you go, okay, juice worth the squeeze?
In training camp, probably not much. I think that, again, as we stated on a previous show, he has to be in charge of this thing, because all the things that he did well in Green Bay, that he learned from his predecessor in Green Bay, of getting guys to offsides, of getting guys, 12 men on the field, of going with the different snap counts and all those different things, all have to be learned. And they all have to be learned by a bunch of new guys that have never played with him before, except for the 3 guys who brought with him. Yep. So you're going to have that damn thing. And don't give me the offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator is not on the field. He's not the guy making sure that you get the snap off when there's 12 guys on the field. It's the quarterback that's doing it. So I think he's going to have to, I think he's gotten everybody on the page that he's here, that he's willing to stay if they want him to. It may be the worst 3 years of their life, but that's up to them at this point. That's what they wanted. They thought, again, he is a huge step up from what they had. That's not a question. Yeah. Doesn't mean the defense stays as good as they were. Doesn't mean other guys don't get hurt. Doesn't mean other guys don't go better. Doesn't mean he used to throw 2 and 3 interceptions a year. He threw 12 last year. Okay, got hurt in the game against the Giants where he hurt his elbow. Who knows? That's not going to happen this year. You are getting a guy who's on this side, who doesn't run anymore. The biggest part, that when he used to beat the Giants in playoff games, and also, although he only beat us once in a playoff game, we beat him the other time. In those games that they used to come in and play us, the biggest thing that he used to do, besides his unbelievably accurate passing, was he would run with the ball. And he would get that first down on 3rd and 12 where everybody's playing man and guys would go. He doesn't do that anymore. And he proved that a couple of years ago down by the goal line where he didn't want to run, and he threw the ball away on 4th down, and they wound up losing that playoff game in the Packers uniform. And so you've seen his skills diminish. And so I'm not sure how many games he's going to win single-handedly. He's going to need protection. He's going to need guys to run the right route. How pissed off he gets. He's like Max Scherzer. He's a perfectionist. And if you run the wrong route, he's going to tell you. And how are guys going to take that? This is a different person. Yeah. When you come in from a different place, this is one of the conversations about Barkley that, again, we'll have later. When you come in from somewhere else, you're not that god that came up through the thing and won all the games and you're part of the tradition of the team. Mm-hmm. You walked in here, you know nothing about this team. All you know is the losers. He goes, oh, I picked them because see how well they played against us last year. Well, we kicked your ass last year too. You didn't come over and want to go to the Giants. So all of the stuff that he tries to put around him and that the Jets, marketing team will put around them is stuff that they're going to have to break through. Because if they lose 3 in a row like they did in Green Bay last year, and he gets up there and he thinks he's going to go, oh, don't worry about it, relax. We always make the playoffs. Yeah, in Green Bay, you always make the playoffs. Right. In Jetland, it's going to be the same old Jets. and then you're going to start to hear it, and you got to, they won't boo him off the field, but they'll boo everybody else off the field.
Yeah.
But
And
again, he's going to need a running game, and so guys have got to stay healthy. He's going to need an offensive line. He had one of the best offensive lines and the longest tenured offensive line in Green Bay. He knew those guys like the back of his, like they were his best friends, all those guys, Bakari and all those. These are 5 strangers. He doesn't know who they are. He doesn't know who's even going to be his left tackle at this point. So I think it's a little bit overkill for a 1-year experiment. If it turns into, hey, if we can win in the next 3 years, then it's worth it. And I guess he took the cut and pay, which means he took the money.
He pulled a James Harden. We'll see if well, hopefully for Jet fans are hoping it'll work out a little differently than it did for Sixers.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing that kind of like surprised me, Joe, was that Rodgers is a guy, and he was notorious for this, whether he was feeling good about the Packer organization or not feeling good. He just wasn't an attendee at like May OTAs of the last few years. And he basically, and no one expected him to stay for all the practices for May. But ironically enough, I mean, he ultimately did. And the thing that came out of that, of him sticking around for all 10 practices, was getting in that on-field work, getting used to playing with these new teammates, especially the wide receivers. Seems to have developed a connection and chemistry with Garrett Wilson from jump, something that's going to be crucial to discuss to this offense, as well as, being able to work through adjustments. And the big thing, and this is something that the young wide receivers in Green Bay used to struggle with over the years, was he actually was able to, he had so much more time being able to like get out in front of teaching them his complicated hand signals, because, his hand signals are kind of like, back in the day when catchers were putting down signs and you can see them move their fingers 50 million times. A lot of what he does to change plays or change formations or change protections is based on those hand signals. So, you got to hope that the fact that he stuck around for all 10, gets them a little out in front of the development of that, because it's going to be key for those guys to they're going to have to peer in and keep an eye out and looking for hand signals, before the ball.
And I think the fact that it's such a big deal that, this team needs to be successful in the short run, but those guys have paid attention to it more than they normally would. Like you said, we all see the Cowboys guys being lazy and not running back to the line of scrimmage and all that kind of stuff, because they're the Cowboys and we're great and everybody loves us. And so who cares? I want to be on TV instead of being a winner. This is a different story. You're not America's darlings. You're ESPN's darlings and you're the NFL Network darling, but you're not America's darlings. And just as many people are rooting for you to fall on your face as they are rooting for you to win. So I think maybe it'll get them to concentrate more and understand all that stuff more, that there's a lot more to play in this game than running the route you're supposed to run. Yeah. You have to look in, and if he does this, it means that same thing with Tom Brady, right? Brady always does this, turn pointing. Peyton Manning started it. All of that stuff is important to learn and not screw it up. Because if you screw it up, the ball goes the other direction.
Yeah, and you know what? Anything that gets young players to pay more attention to details, and pay more attention to their job and what's going on around them in the field, to me, that accelerates their development, especially for a guy like Garrett Wilson, who you really want to be able to, you're envisioning taking, that leap, based on the flashes he showed you last year, despite the poor quarterback play. That's to me, anything that gets those guys to kind of like focus in is a good thing.
The only difference that I see, Jay, that actually could hurt them a little bit in the beginning is all of the plays that Zach Wilson made last year were on scramble drill plays, were on rush drill plays, breaking out of the pocket, getting more time. That ain't going to happen. No, you better run the right route the first time, and
you better be paying attention, or else the ball can hit you in the back of the head.
Exactly, because
I think they're happy that's going to be the case, though. I don't think they're going to be like, let's prepare for the fire drill.
They wanted that, the fact that, you look at it and say, with Rodgers here, with this offense that Hackett and here are installing, you're looking, the hope is that, you'll get more good plays made on schedule, which is obviously the goal of any offensive scheme. But, as Joe said, Rodgers gets a little annoyed when when you don't run the right route or you're not paying attention and the ball does hit you in the back of the helmet. So, you got to have your head on a swivel when you're playing with Aaron Rodgers. The ball's going to come out of his hands quick. You got to be ready.
Well, the good news is 4 of their first 6 games are at home. The bad news is those games are the Bills, the Patriots, the Chiefs, and the Eagles. You tell me where the wins are coming from. Also, by the way, in that same group, at Dallas and at Denver. And if
that's why I say anybody who's claiming Jets have a shot at making a Super Bowl.
Well, yeah. Again, that's why they play the game.
You didn't look at their schedule, did you? And did you forget who's playing in Cincinnati, in Buffalo,
in the first
KC?
I looked at the first 9 games just because they threw them up on the screen the other day, and I went through it just real quick. The old
3-6, 4-5 is a very good possibility.
They could easily go 2-7 in the first 9 games.
They could
easily go 2-7. I'm not wishing it. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying you could easily go 2-7.
I will
and
say
they
this,
could do that playing really good football. They could still be an improved team from last year and still have that record because that schedule is a beast.
That was the importance of him redoing his contract and saying, I'm willing to be here for a bit of time. Because like I said, if it was a 1-year experiment, I would have put my house up that they're now winning the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
But if it's a 3-year experiment and he can build on it a little bit, and again, you don't know who's going to get hurt. We all play this game like everybody on paper is so wonderful. Like everybody is going to do what they used to do. He's never going to be the 4-time, 5-time MVP. He may never win another. He's only won 1 Super Bowl. He may never win another one. Yeah, he's 500 now in the playoffs. So it's not like he is walking in being at the top. It's not like they went out and traded for Patrick Mahomes because he was pissed off at, the Kansas City. They're getting a guy on the downside of his career, as good as he is, as good as he was. That interception rate has grown. His ability to be injured has grown. He's missed a lot of throws that he never has missed in the past. So again, you're on that. You have to admit you're on that downside of it. And you can't expect him to just walk in and carry the team.
He can't. And that's Breece Hall returning to health is going to be a big key for them.
All right, let's continue the Jet slander portion of our program by going to Anthony.
Yeah, Joe, you talked about how Aaron Rodgers played behind an offensive line in Green Bay that had some cohesiveness. I've been together for a long time. Going into this training camp, the Jets have a couple of positions at the on the offensive line that a bit of a toss up. But one in particular, and we talked about this during our show meeting, Mekhi Becton, and obviously which side on tackle, left or right tackle, is he going to line up at? He's come in 50 pounds lighter. He's healthy, but we've kind of heard this story before with Becton. Yeah. What do you think? Of Becton going into training camp and just entirely what this offensive line may stand when you consider Aaron Rodgers playing behind some new guys that he's not familiar with?
Yeah, it's not so much familiarity because those guys kind of practice on their own and do their own thing, but I think it's the fact that they don't know who their starting 5 guys are. You're walking into a situation where you don't know. You can't name the Jets' offensive line at this point. You don't know who's going to be playing center. You don't know who's going to be playing either one of the tackles because they could flip-flop them or whatever they are. You don't know who the guards are going to be. So the fact that you don't know those 5 guys' names off the top of your head makes it very difficult, right? I mean, we all knew when the Giants were great in the 80s, we knew those names. Nelson Ardotes, Elliott, and whoever the other guy was. Crash.
Suburbanites.
Yeah, you knew who they were. And the fact that, and again, if I hear that Mekhi Becton lost another 50 pounds, he must have either been 500 pounds when he started or he's down to 50 pounds at the time. He's just like Phil Mickelson, who every week he used to be on tour. You go, oh, Phil lost 15 pounds in the last 2 weeks and he looks great. I go, yeah, that's good. He still hits the ball the same exact way. So I think the fact that you don't know who the guys are is the concern. You don't have 5 guys with some competition coming up from younger guys, or you brought in a veteran that's going to take somebody's spot, but that guy's going to still back up. Because what did we just say? Someone's going to get hurt. do you have enough depth that look at Tampa Bay, even when they were good, as soon as they lost their center, they were done until he came in.
Yep.
You lose guys on certain positions and you are done because you have no one to replace them, and you start moving guys around, and then you have 4 guys in the wrong spot instead of just 1 guy in the wrong spot. So I think the biggest competition, I'm sure they know about this because it's got to be a concern to them. You know, they'll be picking guys up as guys get cut at the end of the year, but now that the cuts aren't done, you know, they went back to the old way. If the cuts don't get done until after the 3rd game, there's a lot of guys on the street, but they're not on the street until a week before game time.
Yeah.
So what good does that do you at that point? You know, you can't really bring a guy in and learn a system and get him to work with the other guys and all that stuff.
Nope.
It's a very, very difficult job to get a cohesive unit. Look how long it's taken the Giants. We're still not there. You know, we're still not to that point where we know who all the starters are. And it takes a long time to get that going and to get comfortable with what he does every down, to be there, to understand that, to hustle out on the field, to hustle off the field, to be the guy that is going to make the big block, that's going to pick up blitzes against him because he's going to get rushed because even though he's very good at passing, you know, at being accurate and reading the defenses, he's still going to get a lot of pressure on him. And I think that's the key to this whole team at this point, is whether or not they can figure out who's playing the offensive line. And you can't have a guy who everyone told you not to draft in the 1st round 3 years later not know if he's a starter or not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 3 years now, and we still don't know if he can start. We don't know if he can play. He hasn't
Currently
played.
out with the knee
Can't stay
injury,
healthy
by the
enough for
way,
us to learn.
too.
Yeah, I mean, he played how many games? He's played, what, 10 games total or something? I mean,
Yeah.
the guy is not, you know, so how do you know? You can't just say, oh, yeah, he's our left tackle. There's no way you can be, if you're sitting in that room and you're, you know, not that the owner knows anything, but if you're the GM and your head coach goes, oh, yeah, you know, he's our left tackle, you got to go. Yeah, and who is it next week when he can't get off the ground? You know,
I don't think the owner thinks anymore that someone's going to GM is going to declare Mekhi Becton as the left tackle. He's in a battle with Wade Brown, but ironically enough, both are injured. What the heck?
I think it's a real issue. And
It is.
It's a huge issue.
It is, and I go back to a Mike Tomlinism that, you know, to me it gets more true every year. The best ability is availability.
Yeah.
No, Mike Tomlinism, by the way, and bitching about Max Scherzer and James Harden. Who says this show is a personal platform?
I mean, if you don't have 8 guys that can go in there and play at any time,
yeah.
I mean, the Giants lost somebody last year. You know, they brought a guy in who hadn't played all year. He goes in there, he plays very well for, you know, a couple of series. You need that. You need to know the guy who's going to know all the intricacies of the offense, not just to block the guy in front of him.
Yep.
It's not an easy task.
Nope.
Okay, so I'm going to be negative also with my Jets point, just because I kind of want to say, you said it earlier, and I kind of agree with you, and it's kind of a trope. Just because your defense was good one year doesn't necessarily mean after looking at a lot of footage that your defense is going to be that exact same way the next year. Goes for almost every team. We see it in baseball too, by the way. You think the pitching is really good, then the hitting sucks. You think the hitting is really good, then the pitching sucks. And this goes during the whole entire season. So, with that being said, on the defensive side of the ball, what I'm looking at, and there's a lot of small issues in terms of battles, because they are set on a lot of the defensive positions. But in strong side linebacker, Quan Alexander's probably not coming back. So you need a running mate with CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams in their 4-3. And most likely that's going to be Jamie Sherwood, who was pretty much a backup last year on the team. Zaire Barnes and Hamza Nazruddin is fighting for that spot too. Well, I mean, yeah. But, I mean, defense looks good in certain spots. That's something to watch out for. But, again, this is going to be a defense that's going to have to kind of do a lot of the stuff that they did last year. They say they want to be the number 1 defense in the league, but you need to be good for 2 years in a row first.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think it's, again, you can't just, and this was my this is my initial reaction when they started all the Aaron Rodgers talk is don't think you just throw your helmets out on the field and you're going to be great again, because that may not happen. Again, there's plenty of film that goes around. They start to see some tendencies. You have one really good guy out there who people say, okay, you're not going to pick on him and stuff. He may not have any weaknesses, Gardner, but there's plenty anywhere else. And I think I said this to Jay the other night. I would say that linebacker core is the weakest part of their defense. Yeah. And what does that bring? That brings in slot receivers, that brings in tight ends, that brings in guys that they can't cover. There's little choice routes in the middle that get first down. So forget about the corners, because the corners are going to be back there blanketing some guy. It's all the underneath stuff that's going to kill you. And they have a very, very good front four. They probably have a pretty good front five. They have a couple of different guys they can move in and out. But that doesn't always work. Don't forget, you have 2 tight end sets and Max protects, and you're going to have times where guys are going to have to cover guys that they really can't. And that's going to be difficult for them. And again, Mosley's been hurt every year that he's been here. He went out last year for a while, or he came back late, whatever it was, one or the other. He's out the year before. So you can't continue. Again, he's a year older, right? He was already older when he got here. He's now 3 years older than when he was here, and he hasn't played a lot. Does he get hurt again? Does he not? Is he on the downside of his career? I don't think you can count on, again, I don't think there's a name in there you stick in that you just say, well, he's going to make all the plays.
Right.
Even with us getting the guy from Indianapolis was a steal, and, the guy had 150 tackles last year. Doesn't mean you're going to do it again. He had 12 tackles in the game against us. It's the reason we signed him to a free agent contract. They still lost the game, right? I mean, he didn't win the game for them. He played great. He played side to side. He covered guys. He tackled everybody. He was fantastic, but they lost the game. You can't just take one guy out and stick him out there and think he's going to win this thing. So as good as Gardner is, and hopefully he can teach the guy on the other side to be as good, they didn't win with Darrelle Revis either. They didn't win with, there's plenty of guys out there. Of course, with the Jets, you can name anybody that's ever played after 1970 and say that guy didn't win him anything, because they didn't. Even the guys going in the Hall of Fame, they didn't win with them. So they didn't the playoffs in 19.
I mean, they didn't win a Super Bowl with them, but they won games.
They were in, they've been in 5 losing AFC Championship games. 5 losing.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, though. I understand completely what you're saying. All right, we got to move on, because I'm tired of talking about just the Jets, because there's so much. It's not that I'm tired of talking about the Jets. I'm just tired of. There's so much uncertainty with that team that it's ridiculous. All right, so full disclosure, this is the worst 3 weeks in football, because training camp happens and then all of a sudden everything is speculative. Nothing interesting happens. And if something interesting happens, guess what? It's an injury. And that's not good. And it's a stupid hot take debate that no one wants to hear about. And that's not good. Anyway, with that, let's take a look at our other training camps to watch segments that are interesting. Anthony, did you find Bad Bunny over in Puerto Rico? No, right? I know he released a new album. Was there any
no, there was
interesting over there?
There was no performance at a gas station. There was no $15 in people he could walk out to for a Puerto Rico street fight against Damian Priest. There was none of that, okay? But it was a fun trip, nonetheless.
Anyway, so for the man that really still hates JetBlue, we hate JetBlue for at least for your sake. What training camp are you looking at?
I'm looking at the New England Patriots, and it's very strange to think that Bill Belichick would be on a hot seat, even in today's hot take media sports world that we live in. But the New England Patriots were just really mediocre last season, and it falls down onto the quarterback. Now throw the quarterback in Matt Jones. You think of the regression that he had from year one with so much promise, when he threw for over 3,800 yards and 22 touchdowns to go to 13 interceptions, to not even eclipsing 3,000 yards passing, 14 touchdowns to go at 11 interceptions, was actually benched in a game or two Look, in the 2 games against the aforementioned Jets, he was absolutely dreadful in both. And part of it was the dual responsibility of offensive coordinator between Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. That
Though
is
neither
gone.
one of them was ever actually officially given that title by Belichick, if you guys will recall.
Neither of them
Yeah.
should have, so it's a good idea.
Exactly. So maybe Belichick knew something when he didn't actually use that official title for either of them.
Well, Belichick pulled out his own Rolodex because he's not exactly tech savvy. We've seen him at the at-home NFL draft a few years ago using a laptop. We know he's not tech savvy. He pulled out old friend Bill O'Brien's phone number, gave him a call, and invited him back up to Patriots camp to try to rework an offense that was just as bad as it gets, particularly in the red zone. They gave him some more weapons. Juju Smith-Schuster's on board, Javante Parker, Taquan Thornton, Kendrick Bourne, and Mike Gesicki is the tight end that gives him a bit of a red zone option for an offense that was dead last in the red zone on only 42% touchdown ratio in 2022. Defensively, there's another question mark. Lost Starworth and Devin McCourty, he's now retired. Jack Jones is suspected back in court because he was caught with a possession of a firearm at Logan International Airport. Coincidentally enough, he had something to say about John Morant's gun issues. So the irony in that is not lost on yours truly. But the outside the front seven, the secondary is a bit of a question mark for the New England Patriots defense that pretty much either won games or kept them in games most of last season. And then you look at the schedule. One of only 5 teams to open the season with back-to-back home games. They played the Eagles and Dolphins respectively, but 3 of the first 4 games are against 22 playoff teams, and they played 3 straight primetime games from week 14 and 16 at Pittsburgh, at home against Kansas City, and at Denver playing the Denver Broncos. Yeah, Bronco country, let's ride, right?
Yeah.
And look, I'm always going to make fun of that, but the New England Patriots, coming off the season they had, and obviously when you think about Bill Belichick's lack of success without Tom Brady, you can kind of see it's not we're going to get fired hot seat, more of as he passes time and maybe is it time for him to step aside and a fresh face come in to New England. I mean, that's kind of more the hot seat I'm looking at. I mean, and you think about this, and obviously we're old individuals here. We think about how many years that Tom Landry was at the helm and all his prestige and Super Bowl wins, but by the end of his tenure, the Cowboys weren't winning. The young players weren't developing, and new ownership made the change, and Jerry Jones made the change. And we've seen that even the legendary coaches can be replaced at some point. Is Belichick at that point? No. But right now, this is a definitely make or break year for Belichick. It's certainly one for Matt Jones because I can't see the New England Patriots going into year 4 of this young man's career, not knowing if he's going to be the quarterback for the foreseeable future.
The last Alabama starting quarterback that will not be in the NFL currently. There are 4 starting quarterbacks that are playing this year. The last one that has not have a starting quarterback job right now is Jacob Coker, quarterback of the 2015 national champion Alabama.
Oh, you went deep into the archives for that one, Rabbi.
That's insane. By the way, I'm very interested to see how Juju Smith-Schuster ends up in New England, and we'll see if he's kind of lost a little bit of a step because he didn't look like the same in Kansas City because there was kind of a mix of all of the touches, but I don't think he's anywhere near his Pittsburgh self, to be completely honest with you. And that'll be something I'm really interested in.
I'll tell you this.
I would say this. I think the Patriots fans would be really happy if he stays off the TikTok and all the other shenanigans that we saw pregame.
Yeah.
And just get back to playing football and just try to be a playmaker that we saw with the Pittsburgh Steelers a few years back.
I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be – he's not that guy, and he's never going to be that guy again. But if he's the type of guy who, he accepts that he's at the point in his career where he's pretty much a slot guy, move the chains, be the Wes Welker type, if you will. I think that coupled with the type of offense that they're going to employ, that's going to make more sense for a quarterback like Mac Jones, having a safety blanket like Juju. I think it'll be a good fit. And if that happens, then I think you'll see things get back on the track people expected from Mac Jones. Personally, until I see otherwise, to me, last year was an aberration because he was in an offense that was not an NFL caliber offense, run by two guys who have no business running an NFL offense of any caliber.
I don't even think it was a high school caliber offense, but that's just really me. So speaking of teams looking to turn around, Jay, Broncos country, let's ride.
Yeah. I think you guys know I've probably had Denver as my team for this segment pretty much since we talked about them hiring Sean Payton as their head coach on our Super Bowl show back in February. Russell Wilson said all the right things when Payton was hired, and we know what Payton did with future Hall of Famer Drew Brees' quarterback in New Orleans. The question at the time was, and in my mind it still is, whether or not Russ can conform to and play within the structure of Payton's offense. Practices and preseason games, which Payton has said Wilson will play in, will hopefully give us some semblance of an answer to that question. To say that the Broncos have been offensively challenged since Peyton Manning retired after the 2016 season would be like saying the city of Denver is a wee bit above sea level. They've missed the playoffs in each of the last 7 seasons since Peyton retired and have been 24th or worse in EPA per drive 5 times per True Media and have never finished higher than 16th during that time. They finished last in scoring last year, 16.9 a game, and that's with them putting up 55 points over the last 2 games of the year after they fired Nathaniel Hackett. For contrast, Peyton's New Orleans Saints teams finished in the top 5 in scoring 9 times in 15 seasons and in the top 10 12 times in 15 seasons. Wilson last year, 27th out of 33 qualified quarterbacks in EPA per dropback per True Media. The Broncos' team passing success rate, another measure of per pass efficiency, was the worst in the NFL when Wilson was on the field. Now, Wilson was not totally to blame for that, as the Broncos had the perfect storm of injuries, including some to Wilson, coupled with an inexperienced coaching staff that was revealed to be way in over their heads, but it still paints a pretty bad picture. To help improve things, the Broncos upgraded their offensive line in the offseason, adding former Raven Ben Powers at left guard and former 49er Mike McGlinchey at right tackle in free agency, giving both of them multi-year deals. Both of these guys have similar profiles. They're tough, hardworking, steady players who will have just as much to do with changing the culture in the locker room as they will and changing the results on the field, where they'll help improve the run game and keep Wilson upright. He took 55 of the franchise record 63 sacks that last year's offensive line allowed. All of this will be a must in Sean Payton's offense. That revamped offensive line will be coached by Zach Strief, who played right tackle for Payton with the Saints for much of his 12-year career. His knowledge of Payton's system has already helped expedite the installation process. Now, Payton's offense is set up to provide more open throwing windows for Wilson, which should allow for big plays to happen without Wilson having to force throws downfield, which was a consistent issue last season. Wilson's 80 pass attempts of 20 or more air yards were the second most of his career, but his efficiency on those throws, 36.3%, was his second lowest. His EPA per dropback on those attempts was also the second worst mark of his career. Payton will want to take deep shots, but a more effective between the numbers passing game, which is a staple of those Saint offenses, should open up those deep passes more organically. New Orleans was 5th in completion percentage between the numbers during Payton's final 3 seasons, according to Pro Football Focus. But history, it would indicate that Payton's mission to turn this franchise around won't happen overnight. There have been 13 head coaches in NFL history who won a Super Bowl and then coached another team. Only 2 of those head coaches, Mike Holmgren and Doug Peterson, led their second team to the playoffs in their first year on the job. The Sean Payton era begins July 28th for the Broncos when they open their first training camp under their new head coach. For Wilson, it may be the most critical camp since his rookie year in 2012 when he took the Seahawks starting quarterback position away from Matt Flynn, starting him down the path of what's been overall a decorated career, but one that is looking to rebound from its worst chapter. No sugarcoating it, folks. This is a prove-it year for Russell Wilson, and the direction the Broncos' future plans will take hinge very much on how his first season under Sean Payton plays out.
I think it's going to really help Russell Wilson to not have that much of as much of a specter as he had last year. Because I don't think they're going to. I mean, Sean Payton brings a lot of eyes to the game, but they're not going to be on national TV every other week. They're going to have a little bit more of a tempered expectations, and their schedule is not going to be as good either. So let's see if that helps Denver. Still a very, very tough division, and two very good quarterbacks, and Jimmy Garoppolo also in their division as well.
So we're not gonna have Pastor Star making fun of Russell Wilson again on Christmas Day.
I don't know. I mean, they don't have the Nickelodeon Christmas game this year, and I have a feeling there will be a lot of interesting talk going into Denver season. Let's see if he can last the whole season. Joe is actually talking about a training camp of a team that's actually good, so I'm actually interested to see what he thinks about San Francisco.
Actually, so San Francisco, the reason I picked them is I just, that old adage that comes back to me from Bill Parcells, if you don't have
four quarterbacks, if you have four quarterbacks in your system, you have none.
So I'm wondering, what do you do here? You're going to start Purdy, who had a nice run. I mean, I think Jake could play quarterback for this team and have a decent outcome because
I'm a good fit for a Shanahan system as a quarterback. I'm perfect.
You're no Josh Johnson, so I'm going to have to say no to that one.
They have every weapon in the world. They still have a decent offensive line. They have wide receivers and running backs that play wide receiver and wide receivers that play running back. And they have good defenses. They have the Bosa that can play. They have, they have everything. They're the team that, again, if the Cowboys didn't exist, this would be the team everybody would be all over every year. That how do they not win? Okay, so they lost to the playoffs because they're all pro or all-world left tackle doesn't know how to get set, and they have to keep moving them around from one side of the thing to the other, put them in motion and stuff. It's, again, sometimes you overthink yourself, overcoach yourself, over-scheme what you do. Yeah. So you wound up with Brock Purdy. Again, I don't care what the guy's name is. He was nobody that anybody knew. He played well. And again, how could you not play well on that team? But again, he didn't put it all on himself. He didn't become Cam Newton. I have to score all the touchdowns. I have to do everything. He just played within the system, which is kind of what you need with that team, is someone who just plays within the system. So is he going to start? I've heard fans of San Francisco tell me they're looking forward to seeing Sam Darnold.
Oh, really?
You need to come back and watch some film because you are not looking forward to seeing Sam Darnold. And then you've got this kid, Trey Lance, who, what are you going to do with him? If Purdy takes you to the NFC Championship game again this year, what are you going to do with Lance? He's going to be sitting there for 4 years. He's, they're not a team like the Packers where you go, hey, you may sit for 7 or 8 years. You drafted him to be the starter.
Yep.
Unfortunately, he got hurt 6 games into his rookie season, which is what rookies do. They get hurt. And then Garoppolo came, and he's good, but he's not good, and he's okay, and he's not okay. And I just, he's inconsistent sometimes. I don't know what was wrong with him at times, but he got hurt. And then they brought in Darnold, and I just don't know where this team winds up at this point. It's one of those weird teams where you just go, oh, San Francisco, they're really good. They're fantastic. But if you don't have a quarterback and you don't have a guy who runs the system that you're trying to run, and if you start to get a coach, again, I don't like head coaches that call plays, but if they get too schematic and they get too much into how do we get everybody the ball and how do we do stuff, and you're not Andy Reid, I don't know how it works. So especially when you keep changing quarterbacks, the thing about Andy Reid making up all these plays and drawing them in the dirt is he's got a quarterback and it's always the same guy. So that's a big difference. I just don't know how this team gets to the next level without saying, because it's going to happen. They're going to lose 2 or 3 games in a row. He's going to throw somebody. I'm not even going to give a name. Someone's going to throw a big interception. Somebody's going to fumble the ball. And in the locker room, you've got 3 camps. You know there are guys that like Purdy. You know there are guys who would rather see Darnold. You know there are guys who would rather see Trey Lance. So you're creating division within your own team by not saying this is the guy. We got rid of everybody else. We brought in a veteran backup. We traded Trey Lance. We didn't bring in Sam Darnold to be a backup. You know, we brought him in just to be the backup. He's going to do something. You have to decide, and I just don't know how they get out of their own way to get to the potential that they have until they start losing guys.
Three words.
yeah.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's the
Yeah.
perfect spot for Trey Lance to kind of start over. So that's where I'm thinking they would go if they have enough confidence in Purdy.
And that's what I'm saying is you have to make that somewhere along the line. John Lynch has to make that decision to get rid of one of those guys. He's got to say, I'm going to trade Trey Lance for second rounder and 2 third rounders. And we're done with it. Look what we got for him. This is our guy. Or trade Purdy to somebody who needs a quarterback. You know, something. You're going to have to make a decision.
I heard Jay Kaplan, though, is available in free agency to start.
I heard
Apparently, if he's ready to go.
Kaplan is not as good a fit for that system as I am, Joe. Let's get that straight.
Not at all. Not at all.
Subject. All right, let's finish off here.
As much as I'd like to see Colin Kaepernick back in the NFL, just I'm still a better fit for a Shanahan system than he is.
That's right.
Anyway, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers, who they need like a ton of name tags just to get to start their training camp. Like, hi, my name is Frank Reich. I used to coach the Indianapolis Colts, and I got a raw deal in leaving the team because of my owner being terrible. So you got Frank Reich leading this team this year, and I think that's going to be a big step forward through getting past the Matt Rule era, which was never really the greatest of eras. You have
Do you even qualify as an era, Rabbi?
It does qualify as an era. It's a terrible era.
An era and ERROR, not
right.
ERA.
That's right.
Yes,
that is right.
Nice,
the error is there. But you also have Bryce Young, who is going to be the starter of this team. That's been pretty much declared from day one.
Oh yeah.
But Andy Dalton has definitely done a decent job. So if Bryce has any struggles, and I think this is a big year for quarterbacks who are short because of all of this stuff that Kyler Murray went through last year, and a lot of people just discrediting things. And the first thing I always thought about, well, it shows that a short guy can't play the position. Have you ever seen Drew Brees play? Just a heads up. That is something that is a thing. So you have that. He's a better he's a good pocket. He's a decent pocket passer too, and he's not the typical person that you're going to see in that Carolina offense. But then you just have all of these new people. You have Miles Sanders in the running back position. You have all of the new wide receivers, Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, and Jonathan Mingo, who got drafted. Adam Thielen has been a Viking forever, and he really faded away in his last years in Minnesota. So I'm very interested to see how that comes up. There is a lot of hype over to this team, and in a division that no team is really no team definitely took the horns last year. I mean, the Bucks finished 8-9 and won the division with the greatest quarterback who ever lived, apparently. So now you're going to have a David Carr, a Derek Carr led New Orleans team, who will probably be the favorites. You have Atlanta, and I'm not sure if Spencer Riddler or Desmond Riddler can do the job. And Desmond Ritter, these quarterbacks are such no names that I can't even remember who they are. And then you have whoever Tampa Bay is going to throw out there. Most likely it's going to be Baker Mayfield, which is why I think Trey Lance would be a perfect fit for them. And they kept their head coach, for God's sakes, and Todd Bowles, who I'm not 100% sure knows if he's actually coaching half of the time. And he won a Super Bowl. Go figure. So it's a very weird, tough division, and I think if Carolina can have a good training camp, can get everything together, they could surprise. And I think this would be the first step. Do I think it's going to be an overnight change? No. I mean, to do what they did to get Bryce Young is trade up a lot and lose probably one of the best wide receivers in the NFL at DJ Moore, who was a consistent year in, year out player. that's going to be a little bit tougher to try to overcome. But if Carolina has a good year, I would say look at this training camp to see if they can make that progress. All right. So the NFL is a growing business, and business is booming. Players are making more and more money each year, except running backs. On Monday, 3 high-profile running backs, each who are going to very likely be high-volume bell cows in the backfield this year, if they come to camp. Well, 2 of them did. Were all offered franchise tenders, and they did not get a long-term deal. So while Saquon Barkley of the Giants and Tony Pollard of the Cowboys are in camp, Josh Jacobs with the Raiders is still in doubt in signing his tender, and running backs all want their due, and that due apparently is $11 million, and shut up and come back next year and we might franchise you again. So let's start this conversation off. Joe, is this a bad rap for the running back position, or is this just a case of this is what the NFL is?
No, it's changed, and again they've had to give more money to other positions in quarterbacks and in offensive linemen and some crazy wide receivers that commanded some money that certainly they didn't live up to. But that's just how this goes. This is just it's a cyclical thing. As Carl Banks said the other day, when quarterbacks start being, as you said, one of the best abilities is availability. When quarterbacks start getting hurt because you're running the quarterback more, well, guess what? Now you're going to have to go back to a more stand-up in the pocket quarterback that isn't 90% of your offense. You're going to need to have some protection for him and have other ways to play the game. But it's just the way the game has gone. They've opened up the offenses. They've taken away, they changed the rules over the years. It's just more of a passing league. They want to see more scoring. They want to see more what they call excitement. And so that's what happens is there's just not enough money to go around in the salary cap. And, the good thing about the NFL from the owner's side is guys don't give in. Nobody called up and said, oh, let's give Saquon Barkley another $30 million because he deserves it. If you can only pay him 10, you offer him 12. You're not going to offer him, the most. Saquon's a whole different story, I feel, though, because of his injuries. When he was first drafted, he was Rookie of the Year. If he had 2 more years like that, Gettleman had already said in press conference, hey, you guys want me to extend this guy's thing? I'm going to need money to pay Saquon. I'm going to need money to pay so-and-so. They were already making plans to make him one of the highest paid running backs. Like the fact that he only played 22 games in his first 3 years, that's a big deal. You can't, and then he got caught in the change of ownership not ownership, but in front office.
GM. Yeah.
That all of a sudden they're like, hey, we have to see what we have here. We got to see what this team's made of. So they couldn't do it last year. The good thing about him, and I think the way that they convinced him this time is he didn't sign his franchise tag. He got offered a different deal with 3 incentives and everybody goes, oh, why'd they make the incentive so high? Those 3 incentives, if he makes them, do not count against the salary cap. If you offer him an incentive for doing less than what he has done in the previous year, that's a different type of incentive. It's called a makeable incentive. And that would count. So if they said, if you score 5 touchdowns, if you 700 yards, if you catch 30 balls, we're going to give you all this money. That counts against the salary cap. If he does more than he's ever done the year before, then it doesn't count against. So they were able to throw him an extra $1 million. They were able to give him a signing bonus, and they saved themselves a franchise tag. They didn't have to use it. They still have it sitting on the books. So if he gets tagged again next year for $13 million, that's still only one time. But again, they'll have a lot of times to go through. And the other thing I think that happened with Saquon is, here's another guy who changed agents in the middle of a negotiation. Daniel Jones did it and Barkley did it. And I think, and, correct me if you guys think I'm off base on this, but I think there's a lot of new agencies out there that are more player friendly. Okay. They're more like the guys that are the athletes. They know where to take the athletes to have a good time. They know the kind of things that they want to do, the kind of products they want to endorse. but they're not, but they haven't been around long enough to know all the little tricks of the trades and all the different ways of getting money done and getting things and how many incentives can you add and how we can do this, putting on marketing incentives, putting on different things. And so these guys who have come in who are new and more, again, more of the age of the athlete. And, these guys don't want to go to dinner, at Nobu with Lee Steinberg. They want to go hang out at the club or go down to go to some sporting event or whatever it is. That's great. But these guys don't have the knowledge to get some of these deals done. And all these deals seem to always want to be the biggest deal, right? Everybody wants to have the biggest contract and the biggest guaranteed money. But even with the Daniel Jones thing, and this is the one thing that still bugs me when they say, oh, he got $160 million. No, he didn't. He's getting $9 million this year. He's getting less than Saquon is this year. He's getting paid $9 million this year. So if you need to put all that money out into the future and give them assignments to say, oh, look what we got our client, it becomes advertising for those agencies. And that's what ruins these negotiations. There was no way Shane was going to go along with, hey, let's put 2 voidable years on the end of the contract and say he got paid, even though he's only going to get 12 a year. Let's say he got paid $300 million because he's Saquon. He's not going to go along with that. And I think that's what hurt them in the negotiations. Shane said it today. He said the deadline passed. The next morning I picked up the phone. I called his reps and I said, so forget all that stuff because we can't do anything about it anymore. We're not allowed to do anything more than 1 year. So have him come in. We won't use the tag on him. We'll give him some incentives. We'll give him $2 million when he walks in the door and let him play because we want him in the building because he's a captain of the team and he's a leader and he's that kind of guy. He doesn't want to ruin his reputation around New York with people saying, oh, he's greedy. He's sitting out. He hurt our team. We could have had a chance of winning the Super Bowl this year. The Jets are going to be good. Why can't we have somebody? That he didn't want to do that because that ruins what? That ruins the Madison Avenue end of it, as they used to call it, where he could make more money for the rest of his life. This is the argument with the guys who went over the Live Golf also. They go, you know how much money you threw away after you retire? Because no one's going to remember who you are and no one's going to care and nobody wants you to do any of this stuff. They took Mickelson off the Rolex commercial. They took them all off of these things. Those guys, yeah, you made a lot of money right now, but in 10 years when you retire and you are one of the lesser guys on that tour, you're not going to make any money doing endorsements. Nobody's going to care who you are. Nope. So, look at Carl Banks was the one who said, hey, don't be silly. Don't be a principled fool was the quote that he gave. And he was right. He said, look at me. I'm retired. I'm still getting paid by the team. I'm on television. I'm on radio. Look at Tiki Barber. Tiki he left the team, but he came back. He made his mea culpa. He talked about Kaplan. He came back. He was embraced by the ownership. And he's
embraced by New York now. And he's
part of the fabric of New York. So, and again, this is what I was saying about switching teams. Barkley to go and it was funny that Carl Banks kept using Seattle. He goes, you don't want to wind up in Seattle as Saquon Barkley for 2 years because you're not going to be embraced by them. You were born here, you grew up here, your family's from here, you were drafted here, you play here, you're a star here, the fans love you. He said there are 3 guys in New York that are known by one name: Judge, Rodgers, Saquon, and that's it. Nobody else can make those claims of saying, I know who you're talking about. Nobody on the Knicks is that way. Nope. Nobody on the Rangers is that way by first name basis that can just walk into anywhere and have everybody know who they are and get paid whatever they need to get paid to have them do a commercial. And they will for the rest of their lives.
Only because Igor
has advantage that is fantastic, but he ain't going to be around here after he retires. So he's not going to be doing commercials after he retires. Henrik Lundqvist is another one who's
Henrik perfect. Is a huge example of that.
Henrik is one that before he retired, he was in that same boat. And again, look at him now, right? Because he stayed here, he never left. Boom, you get all the money afterwards, and that's what counts.
The only problem with that is, first of all, yes, Daniel Jones is only getting paid $9 million this year, but he's also going to get $82 million guaranteed for the life of his salary, even if he never has another All-Pro season again. So that's one thing to keep in mind there.
but they can also let him go in 2 years.
Yeah,
and not-
that's the
They
other.
can't let him go in 2 years, but he still has $82 million more because this is all about money.
But the
This is all about money and not necessarily security.
No, and the numbers don't mean anything anymore because the money's
They don't, but those numbers are literally on the books of how much.
Again, look at NBA
Yeah.
players that sit out half the games and nobody cares.
Load management.
To the point where the commissioner has to create an in-season tournament to try to get people to watch games.
They have to mandate that you play 65 games in order to be eligible for awards.
I think it's a little bit of a different scenario on that. I think bringing everything back to running backs in this situation. And again, I hate the franchise tender, and I think that really is the whole point of all of this, which I want to talk about in a second. Anthony, Josh Jacobs kind of in the same boat, and he's the one that is still currently not reported into camp.
Yeah, literally an NFL show, and we're talking about load management. And we made 2 mentions of it tonight. Unbelievable.
I was going to make a third, by the way, in terms of CJ.
Load management would be deciding a guy can't play. In the NBA, it's guys just don't want to play. So it's a different thing. That's not team load management. That's personal load management.
There you go.
Well, here's the thing. Josh Jacobs was technically, he was at camp technically because he was sitting at the parking lot of the Raiders practice facility before he decided, yeah, I'm going to go back home. I'm not going to sign my franchise tag. And I'm just pretty much going to go home and sit it out. And the thing is, too, was like Saquon, Josh Jacobs is so important to the Oakland Raiders. I mean, he literally led the NFL in rushing last season, over 1,600 yards, and over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. First all pro, second Pro Bowl berth for Jacobs. But here's the thing: unlike Saquon, he did not sign his tenure, so he's not going to be fined. He can pretty much sit out the preseason, sign his tenure the day before the season starts, and he'll be welcomed back with open arms. But here's an option too. I mean, if the Raiders front office don't feel like they want to move forward with Jacobs, there's always the option of trading him because he would basically a team would be getting him on a 1-year deal, a 1-year rental. I mean, I was kind of looking up some scenarios and teams that could actually use a running back, and just so happened a team in Buffalo could use an actual running back because you can't have Josh Allen running forever back there and getting his head taken off like we saw in that Cincinnati playoff game. But with Josh Jacobs and obviously want to have a bigger thing with the running back situation is the fact that he was franchise tagged. They couldn't come together with a multi-year deal. But unlike Pollard, unlike Saquon, he decided to play the long game and leave camp. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Raiders do because the Raiders are in a situation where they have a new quarterback and obviously we have a new quarterback and a new system. It's always great to have that safety net, that safety security net, and a running back who knows going to show up week in and week out, not just be productive on the ground, but also has a receiver and has a pass blocker. So it's going to be interesting to see because I mean the whole thing about the running back position. I mean, and part of it is, and I obviously brought this up with Rabbi last week. The game has changed. It's so more pass happy. We see more RPOs involved. We're long removed from the days of when Emmitt Smith held out, and it literally cost the Cowboys the first 2 games of the 1993 season. And when he came back, he was league MVP because Jerry Jones finally decided to pay him. So we're a long way from that, and part of it is the game changing and the position of the running back kind of being devalued quite a bit. Hey, I'm hurt too. I was a running back. How do you think I feel about seeing my brother and not being paid? But at the same time, like I said, Jacobs is going to be interesting to see because I think, look, we're at the point where guys just pretty much find ways to skip training camp if they can to preserve their bodies to get ready for the regular season. So I think the Raiders kind of felt this was going to happen, but the moment he signed his tenure, I mean, he's going to get the $10 million guaranteed, and he's going to be right back into the fold as soon as he does that.
So, by the way, if you think the Bills are really starving for a quarterback, there's still a running back out there who is average 1,000 yards, had 43 touchdowns over the last 4 years.
Is this
Has
initial?
only
Is
missed
this
seven.
initial?
DC.
Is it
Yeah,
DC?
and
Yeah,
has
that's
only
the
missed
initial.
7 games over the last 4 seasons. So I don't know what the Bills are trying to do with that. I don't think they're really thinking about the running back position. Jay, I hate to say this is just commonality now, but that's what that is.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you guys 2 things that I'm known for: a rant and some next gen stats. So here we go. How crazy is it that the NFL is the only professional league that directly ties player compensation to the position that a player plays? The NBA, NHL, MLB, the best players get paid the top salaries regardless of positions. Salaries aren't slotted for pitchers versus outfielders in baseball, or forwards versus goalies in the NHL, or centers versus guards in the NBA. But in the NFL, running backs that get franchise tagged, no matter how dominant a force they are in their team's offense, will make nearly $1.3 million less than a tight end, $8.15 million less than an offensive lineman, $9.7 million less than a wide receiver, and $22.3 million less than a quarterback. Kickers and punters, and I wagered long snappers, are the only positions where running backs won't make less on the franchise tag. Interestingly enough, an idea being floated about that came out of a conversation some running backs that I'll name later had with the NFLPA was that maybe it's time to eliminate position designations for players on the franchise tag and just have a general franchise tag that applies more broadly. NFL decision makers like to use the term devalued when talking about running backs. They dig their heels in on the premise that they can get by with a plug and play mentality or a committee approach to the position. I've never ascribed to that theory. The right running back can change or take over a game in more ways than any other offensive position outside of the quarterback. Anthony just talked about Josh Jacobs. I'm going to tack on here. The Raiders are being, in my opinion, utterly stupid with his contract situations. I think mostly because they have former Patriots in charge, and folks from the Belichick tree ascribe to his philosophy of plugging and playing running backs, which is fine when you don't have a Josh Jacobs. I think this will eventually come back to bite them in the ass. To me, he's the epitome of the running back I described. He was hands down the Raiders' best offensive player last season, leading the NFL, as Anthony said, in rushing and yards from scrimmage. One of only 2 players in franchise history, and Hall of Fame running back Marcus Allen is the other, the top 2,000 yards from scrimmage in a season. He had 5 games with 140 yards rushing and a touchdown, almost twice as many as the next closest player. He accounted for 49.9% of the team's touches from scrimmage, which is the highest percentage in the NFL, and nearly 37 percentage points above the next Raider. His 93 rushing first downs were 24 more than anyone else in the NFL and equaled or exceeded the total number compiled by 8 teams: the Vikings, the Dolphins, the Chargers, Colts, Texans, Rams, Bucks, and Jets. The danger for players like Jacobs is that teams will run them into the ground and move on quickly. Check this stat. Jacobs accounted for 79.4% of the Raiders' rush attempts last season, tops in the NFL. Since entering the league in 2019, he ranks in the top 5 in carries, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and yards from scrimmage. It's a hell of a workload in a very short period of time. All right, if you look at the top tier of running backs and you say that it starts with Christian McCaffrey of the Niners, who averages $16 million a year in contract, and Alvin Kamara of the Saints, $15 million average per year, and you use former NFL GM Randy Mueller's criteria to determine if any other running back separates themselves from the rank and file of the position and therefore should get paid even close to that level. Here's the criteria. Can he get you yards above the design concept and execution of others? Can he score from anywhere on the field? What's his role on third down in the passing game and in the red zone? If you look at those 3, Jacobs and possibly Barkley should be getting close to that type of money because they check all 3 boxes. Here's Mueller's quote. If you polled football people in the NFL, both Barkley and Jacobs would be top 5 bags and worthy of getting paid top running back money. Bare minimum, they should be paid at the same level as the running backs at the next level down. You're talking the Titans' Derrick Henry, $12.5 million average. The Browns' Nick Chubb, $12.2 million. And the Packers' Aaron Jones, $11.5 million. Even though none of these running backs check all three of Mueller's boxes. Look, the change to the CBA that allowed teams to contractually tie up first-round picks for up to 8 years, first 4 on fully guaranteed deals, followed by a 5th-year team option, followed by up to 3 consecutive years of franchise tagging, means that first-rounders might go their entire career, which according to NFLPA data averages 3.2 years, without receiving a multi-year extension or reaching the open market in free agency. It's an unfortunate reality that running backs got screwed the most by that change more than any other position. It's why some agents won't look to sign college running backs unless they're projected to go top 10 where the money is good at the start, or likely to be selected after the first round, because the CBA allows those running backs to renegotiate their contracts after 3 seasons or hit free agency after 4. Running backs need to get as much money as they can as fast as they can because they do tend to have a shorter shelf life than any other playmaking position. Want some context? According to Pro Football Focus, of the 173 players who took a snap as a running back last season, only 15 were 30 years old or older. The thing that sucks most for big name running backs is that you got the likes of rookie 7th-round pick Isaiah Pacheco, who are starting for Super Bowl winners these days. The Joe Mixons of the NFL are taking pay cuts just to stick around. The Dalvin Cooks of the world are getting unceremoniously cut, and teams are believing that with spread offenses, rushing yards are more a factor of the scheme than a factor of any particular player, so running backs have less leverage in contract negotiations than they've ever had. It's why in the wake of Barkley and Jacobs not signing their franchise tenders before Barkley signed his contract, you saw so many other running backs like Henry, like Najee Harris of Pittsburgh, who was on that call at the NFLPA and was quite vocal about the situation in his first media session with reporters from the Steelers reported training camp, saying that on the field, running backs are treated like valuable assets, essential to the success of their teams, and are counted on to make plays. But it's an entirely different story at the negotiating table where they get much less respect than they do on the field. You got guys like Jonathan Taylor, who will be up for a contract extension after the season. And he's also been vocal about how he sees his position being treated. They've all taken to social media to rage against a system that is so stacked against them and their brethren. Running back has become the only position where great production doesn't get rewarded at contract time. It's a double standard, and these guys have every right to be pissed.
And here's no, go ahead.
Well, 2 things. One is the contracts that you brought up were signed a few years back to healthy guys. And the CBA was signed by every player, so they all know what's coming.
Oh,
And by the way, Saquon Barkley, when he signed his original deal as the number 2 back, got $32 million. And he wound up playing 22 games. But the average for that is still only $8 million. So he was offered, he's making more money by coming back in and seeing if he can get a new long-term deal next year if the team can afford it. You still have all the salary cap issues. You have all the other stuff that you got to deal with. So the only thing I don't like about that, and Jay sent me the article that he was referencing from The Athletic, is I don't think you can go back that far and pick guys that are different ages and have different injury situations and on different teams and compare them, because you can make it sound like anything you want. It's just like statistics, right? You can make them sound any way you want it to go. The only fault I found in the article was going back that far and finding guys that got paid 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and what they did, because at the time Barkley got just what he deserved at that point. He got a $20 million signing bonus. So he's not on food stamps. It's not to the point where
obviously.
And Joe, I understand completely what you're saying. That's kind of why, where you can, and each contract, even though I'm using average, annual value, there's the way each contract is structured differently, and guys have different incentives and different signing bonuses and all that, which, can equate to different things. I'm focused on those salaries just from the standpoint of this is how the running back position is being treated salary wise. And, where do these guys, in terms of that, where do they deserve to be paid in comparison to the best guys that are in the NFL at that position? Are they being paid commensurate at the level, if you consider them to be in that same level as those 5 guys I talked about, whose salaries I threw out there, if they're considered to be that level, if Jacobs and Barkley are at that same level, why are teams being reluctant to pay them what they should be worth?
Well, and the idea of you got to go back to the idea of the franchise tag was so that the small market team didn't become the Tampa Bay Rays and lose their top players every 4 years because they couldn't afford to pay them.
Mhm.
So, it gets to that point where they had to do, and that's why it's done by position. That's how the best system that they came up with at the time. It was to protect the smaller market team. I mean, if you had Saquon and you paid him $33 million, they only played half the time because of injuries. If you were a small market team, could you go out and pay him another $60 million to make him the highest? No, but somebody else would. And you
No,
knew it.
right, and it
So
made sense at the
they're just
time.
protecting guys from becoming free agents.
Oh, yeah.
Left and right and having to lose them. So
And it made sense.
I don't think the system's great. I'm just saying that's how it was,
And at the time, I just think that, it's kind of been manipulated to give the owners some cost certainty and they figured they need at least one position on the field where they can have some cost certainty.
Right.
And this is the position they focused on. And the rank and file signed that CBA and they may not have seen this coming, but I guarantee you the owners saw this coming, which is probably why they didn't fight it too hard.
We all know that the owners play chess and the players play checkers. And you know that nobody who signs this agreement reads it.
And I'll tell you this.
There are still guys getting suspended for gambling. There are guys getting suspended, and they all go, or even when the fines come out every week, and Jay, you and I have this text all the time.
Yep.
Some idiot always goes, he was fined $10,631. They go, what do they just make these numbers up? They go, no, it's written into the CBA because a couple of attorneys got together and negotiated a number, and they came down to $10,631, and they both signed it.
I think it's more, by the way, the owners are playing chess and the players are playing Connect 4.
Maybe
that's probably more.
It's only gotten worse, and I think you guys will agree with me. For the players, it's only gotten worse since Gene Upshaw's been gone, because you have people now in charge of the NFLPA who've never played the game, who don't truly understand, who, didn't suffer through what guys like Gene Upshaw suffered through when he was playing, and therefore have a different perspective on what is worth fighting for and what is worth allowing, what is, what hill they want to die on.
I would like to sum this up before we all get out of hand, and I want to just say
I was going to say Battleship because we all see that
it's not even Battleship
at this point, but
not even Battleship.
No, Connect 4 is probably the best analogy. Rabbi is spot on with that.
Okay.
No, because that's a little too complicated for at least them. So here are some things that I think the Dalvin Cook situation is the most interesting, because the one thing I hate about all of this with the three people that we talked about is they don't get to go to the open market. And that's why the franchise tag is ridiculous in my book. I understand it's the NBA's definition, as you said, of basically the Larry Bird rights. You'll get paid more if you re-sign over here. But if you're going to keep the franchise tag, which again is the right thing for management to do, because as much as you're saying you're not giving respect to Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, or Tony Pollard in this situation, it's the smartest thing to do, because you only have to pay them 1 year, $11 million, and basically put them on a make it or prove it deal. What really is annoying is that you could do this again. Now, no one's ever had this done a third time, although I feel like Kirk Cousins probably could have easily had this done a third time, which is why he got all that guaranteed money in Minnesota.
Maybe.
But please, for the love of God, 1 year, that's it. That should be the only time that's actually used, because it's ridiculous.
And I think you should be able to. And I think you should be able to continue to negotiate the following year.
And that's the other. And that's exactly what I'm saying. You should be able to negotiate at any time with that deal, and not say, "Oh, it's completely off of the table. You have to sign a 1 year deal." Also, I don't think there should be a situation where you have to give up 2 first-round picks for a franchise quarterback if it's a for a franchisee if it's a non-quarterback. Right. These are just dumb. And yes, we also talked about Jay talked about the realigning positional values. All of this, the franchise tag just makes this even worse. And that's even another story for a completely another time. But That's
It's
what I
true.
really like. That's what I really hate about this whole situation. But again, I'm looking at that Dalvin Cook thing a lot more too, because with someone with the track record of what he's had and the offense that he's played in and the pedigree he had in college, the fact that he's not signed yet, and even DeAndre Hopkins, who is going to a team, is now signed with the Titans, and he still had to wait a while, really shows necessarily what kind of market we're getting to offensively. And it might start getting to wide receivers too. Just pay attention to that.
Mhm.
All right. So before we go, I would like to talk very quickly about college football. And I would like to talk very quickly about the men who lead college football. Yes, this has been a great debate of who is the highest paid player in your person in your state, the highest paid employee. And you answer that in 9 out of 10 times, it's probably going to be a college football head coach. Whether it be in Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, who is about to get suspended 4 games. And don't you dare tell me it's a fair punishment. Have you seen the first
It's a
4 games
joke.
of the
guy was
season?
buying hamburgers. Come on. They're doing it to him because he lied about it. Give me a
Yeah,
break.
he was a liar about it. And yes, what a horrible punishment. They're not even playing a conference opponent until the 4th
No,
week.
it's
and
the
that
cupcake
opponent
part of their
is
schedule.
Rutgers. It's not a cupcake
It's a
part
joke
of the schedule.
suspension for a joke crime.
It is a joke suspension for a joke crime, but not going to be too harmful. However, if you look at the situations that Pat Fitzgerald is in with Northwestern, being a person who basically just, I wouldn't say turned a blind eye, but saw a group of bad decisions being made and hazing being done in his own college. And basically, once he got fired, he's now fighting it for wrongful termination. What happened to the days of being humble, being understanding, or being the fact that maybe if you have a bad if you have a bad situation and you go 1-11 during that season, that maybe all of the he's a right head coach, he's one of the best head coaches in college football. Maybe you should realize that you might want to stop right there and just take your licks and just see what you can get in court. I don't understand how everything ends up the way it does, but I don't understand the pushback to some of these things. Look at Bob Huggins of college basketball in West Virginia, a guy who got caught doing a bunch of terrible things. And he resigned, supposedly resigned, not after doing a radio hit where he basically was a little mean to a certain community of the world. No. It ended up after having another DUI. But then he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I really apologize, but I didn't actually resign and I was just going in for therapy and I want to leave the rest of my life as a West Virginia Mountaineer." And also got pissed that it wasn't the guy that he actually wanted to lead taking the program, and that's why he's fighting for his job. Where's the contrition? Where is the person that actually understands what kind of person he really is? It's ridiculous. This is all ridiculous.
Yeah.
College coaches have gone just a little too far in terms of being well paid, well groomed, and well individuals that may or may not actually have any moral standards. Is a thing in life, because apparently in your college coach, you're supposed to be a leader of men. That's bullshit, and we all know it. This rant may be going all over the place, but I don't care. These two situations just prove to me that college coach is one of the sleaziest professions that you could possibly have in all of sports. I've never seen a profession that just doesn't care about morals in any way, shape, or form. And this is after all the Jerry Sandusky, Joe Paterno stuff from many years ago. So when you watch college football on September 2nd, like I felt to start the season, just remember that the people that you're watching on the sidelines may not be the ones that you ever thought would be your leaders of men all around the country.
Yeah.
I would say this. As long as money, boosters, alumni, as long as they're still around, you're going to see things like this happen. Like the Northwestern situation, I mean, it pretty much got swept under the rug had the details of the investigation not been made public, and that pretty much forced the school head to fire Fitzgerald. So we know that situation, how that situation would have played out had the details not come out. But I have to say, agree with you, Rabbi. I mean, it's like college coaches nowadays. I mean, they're supposed to be the setting the examples, but they're no different than what we see in the professional ranks. It's about winning. It's about money, and in the case of college coaches, it's also about the prestige and the fact that they're going to have boosters behind them. That's going to be constantly supportive. And as long as those things are going to continue, you're going to see things like this. You're going to see situations like Pat Fitzgerald. You're going to see like people like Bob Huggins that keeps getting a slap on the wrist, even though he should have been dismissed ages ago for all the things he's done and said too publicly that has been out there. But that's pretty much what it is. I mean, college has become a business. And now it's just not just the coaches and the TV and the athletic presidents and the boosters. Now we have with the students now in NILs, and now the bigger schools complaining about that being a problem when for years they were the ones who had all the advantages as far as recruiting.
Power.
Yeah, they had the more power, so now they're complaining about it. So, like I said, it's all about the dollars and the money that you could bring in. And as long as that's going to continue to be the main factor, there is no such thing as morality in college sports.
Yeah, I mean, Rabbi, it's just interesting that you kind of alluded to the whole Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky thing, because that's kind of where my brain went when I first started, getting past the headlines and getting into the story of what went down at Northwestern. And kudos to the three, student journalists who broke that story at Northwestern. And the reason my brain went there is the whole thing about the head coach being responsible for everything that happens on his watch. If you didn't know something bad was happening, you were asleep at the wheel. If you did know it was happening and allowed it to continue, then you're just as complicit as those actually engaging in the bad behavior. Fitzgerald can claim all he wants that he wasn't aware this is going on, but there's too much testimony from eyewitnesses saying that even assistant coaches and other staff members were aware of these acts of hazing that demonstrably crossed the line for Fitzgerald not to know. You can say it's circumstantial, and you can say that where there's smoke, there's fire isn't a legitimate claim of malfeasance. But I'm sorry, just like a commanding officer in any of our country's military branches, a head coach is responsible for all the actions taken by those under his command. That's why the military has a charge called culpable negligence, which is defined as negligent act or omission accompanied by a culpable disregard for the foreseeable consequences to others of that act or omission. And if that doesn't describe what was going on at Northwestern, I don't know what does. I mean, to me, that pretty much sums it up. Behavior like what the Northwestern football team is being accused of is no longer something that can be chalked up to simple hazing rituals, college football culture, or boys being boys. It's unacceptable no matter which way you slice it. And I'm glad Northwestern reversed itself and changed an off-season suspension to a complete severing of ties with the head coach under whose watch this happened. As for Bob Huggins, the rabbi knows full well that I've never been a fan, and that goes all the way back to his time at Cincinnati. I didn't like his thug style of basketball or how he presented himself. His comments on that radio show were reprehensible, but sadly completely on brand for him. He's that much of a bigot, and he's that stupid to think that comments like those wouldn't come back to bite him in the ass. Huggins may be considered by some in the game to be a pretty good basketball coach, but Huggins, the person, is from an era that's long gone, and he's shown that he's incapable of adapting to the one we currently live in. He can rage all he wants about not being on board with being let go, but people like him no longer have a place in college basketball. The sport will be better off without him. Good riddance to bad rubbish.
All right, we're going to stop it right there because it's getting late. So, by the way, thank you, Joe Tufaro, for joining us tonight. Anything you want to plug real quick before we head off?
Nope, not at all.
Okay, cool.
Good.
All right, there that is. All right, for Jay Kaplan, Joe Tufaro, Anthony Strait, and myself, the man with the Kenergy, Stephen Rabinowitz, this has been On the Sports Lines. Remember, youtube.com/On the Sports Lines if you want to see us on demand, facebook.com/On the Sports Lines for any news about the show, and mostly going live. And Jay.
Our Twitter handle is at ONTH Sports Lines, where when the sun comes up, you'll see a link to this particular edition, as long with check it back every once in a while. We tend to drop little nuggets of sports information and stories we think are worth your while to check out.
And any updates on the U.S. women's national team, by the way, who ended up tying 1-1 at the end of everything. All right, have a good night from On the Sports Lines. We will see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.